think. Hayes, he might be too far out, I think. Could Lenny find the distance from here? He's looking for Goddard, I think. Or Graham.
Yeah, Collingwood will be certainly covering those long-range kickers. He's just going to take this on his shoulders himself.
Well, he's a man for a big occasion, we know that, but can he get the distance? He's pumped it hard, he's pumped it long, he's kicked the goal! Lenny Hayes found a metre when he needed it.
Well, it is our pleasure this week. We were lucky enough to have this chat lined up a week or so ago, and then obviously with the news of the last few days, it's rather timely and certainly rather deserved. One of the all-time greats of the club, 297 games, 3 best and fairest, 4-time All-Australian, and unfortunately the only St Kilda player ever to win a Norm Smith medal. I'm sure a lot of us wish that was a little bit different, but he does have that honour around his neck from the 2010 Drawn Grand Final. I speak of Lenny Hayes. Lenny, congratulations, and thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me on.
So I guess going back to where it all began, because you would have thought a lot about that this week, I'm sure, when we reflect on the journey. You were a young kid from north of the border who arrived at Moorabbin and was playing games at Waverley. I guess we've got to go back that far under Tim Watson. Can you take us through, I guess, those formative years that led you to Moorabbin and those first impressions?
Yeah, I guess playing sort of AFL up here in Sydney, just the dream of playing AFL and even the pathway to get there wasn't quite known to me as a youngster, but sort of as I got a little bit older and started making a few sort of rep teams, one thing sort of led to another and ended up getting picked up by the Saints with pick 11 in the draft, which I was absolutely rapt about. A chance to come down to Melbourne and play for a Melbourne team that had a lot of history. It was a dream come true. So yeah, it was a thrill. I'll never forget my first day walking into the club. My mum and I had driven down from Sydney. It was raining, as it can in Melbourne. And the first person I saw as I walked into the club was Jason Cripps, pumping out about 130 kilos on the bench press. So I immediately thought, I'm in the wrong place here. But yeah, just those early years were unbelievable. So many just legends of the game at the club. To walk in there as an 18-year-old was, it was unbelievable.
Lenny, did you cop any shit from mates growing up when you were playing the aerial ping pong back in the day?
Oh, I certainly did. Yeah, absolutely. Like almost daily, really, at school, because there's only sort of 2 other guys at the school who played AFL. So it was just, that was a game that grown men wore tight shorts in, and but I used to go back to them. Well, at least I don't sniff bums for a living. So. As most rugby players do. So, but there was always a bit of banter. But it's funny now, like AFL's, it's become really popular here in Sydney, which is great.
Who was it you actually looked up to when you were growing up? Who were the stars that were actually known in the game? Because, as you say, only a few people really probably followed the AFL. But what really pushed you towards the AFL instead of NRL?
I think the original probably influence was my dad, who was from Victoria. So he was a mad North Melbourne supporter. So he always would watch it of a weekend. And I guess lucky enough that, the Swans, obviously relocated up here in the mid-'80s or early 80s. That coincided with sort of my childhood. So we'd go every week. And I think once I went to a few games and joined up at Pennant Hills Junior Footy Club, I was hooked, so early sort of heroes were, the Swans teams of the 80s, late 80s with, Gerard Healy, Greg Williams, Warwick Kappa, the wizard back in the day. And sort of as I got older, like, guys like Robert Harvey, Shane Crawford, those elite midfielders were guys that I really looked up to.
Obviously, certain things you can teach, certain things you can't teach. So you were the game's most prolific tackler up until, I think, Matty Prittis might have rolled just past that slightly in numbers. But you can teach people how to kick. You can teach people how to run, how to tackle, how to jump. You probably can't teach appetite, hunger, ferocity. You were noted as just about the best we've ever seen at that constant tenacity. Stephen Baker referenced it during the week. That it's 100 points up, 100 points down with a minute to go. You're still banging in. Can you pinpoint where you developed that? Has it always sort of been inside you that's sort of made you that, I guess, warrior type player, if you will?
I think I was pretty competitive as a youngster. Mum used to tell the story that we'd be playing Monopoly and I'd always change sides to whoever had the most hotels and motels because I hated losing. But I think also, I reckon Grant Thomas had a fair bit to do with it. Our mantra when he came on board was 100% effort, 100% of the time, and being mentally and physically really tough. So I think I definitely probably had it in me, but I thought Grant brought out the best of that in me and a lot of other guys as well.
Lenny, how do you feel about the comparisons? For a long time during your career, you were compared with Jude Bolton, who obviously went a couple of picks earlier and was a Saints fan growing up. You went pick 11 to St Kilda as a Swans fan. How did you deal with that at the time? Because for a while there, Jude was, I guess, the more accomplished player earlier in careers. But how did you kind of deal with those kind of constant comparisons through the career?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I've sort of made contact with Jude over the last couple of days. He obviously still lives here in Sydney, so we bump into each other every now and again. And our careers have sort of been intertwined almost the whole way throughout. We even played under-18s TAC Cup against each other. He played for the Calder Cannons, and he was someone I just always admired. He was the gun on baller from Victoria, and then had an unbelievable career at the Swans. And it was just funny. Yeah, he bagged for the Saints. I was a Swans man. We ended up playing a similar position. Probably played a similar style, and just admired his longevity. He never got injured. For a guy that it always baffled me how he could look so pretty too, the way he played the game. But yeah, just had the ultimate respect for him. So I guess those comparisons at times probably did drive me as well. There's no doubt. There's a little bit of competition between draftees who go in the draft and who gets games earlier and who can be the first one to 50 or 100 games. So I reckon that probably drove both of us throughout periods of our careers.
Now, speaking of tackles and the like sort of thing, going back to basically your first game, obviously it's something that's been talked about a lot. Truthfully, how much do you remember of what actually happened right at that moment? We do know you got straight back up, but how long did it actually take to sink in? But this is the big time.
Oh, yeah, I think I said to someone earlier, I was never hit that hard for the rest of my career. So, and it was just a totally legal hit. I think he actually might have even got reported for it, but it was a clean hit straight up the middle. So I wasn't actually concussed. I just couldn't breathe. Like he knocked the bejesus out of me. So I think from that moment, I always used to think that I had a pretty good sidestep, but I reckon I probably made sure I was even better the next time we played North Melbourne. But yeah, it's probably one of those moments, the welcome to the big league, just your classic, 18-year-old versus seasoned veteran. And I guess I thought after I got up and could sort of keep playing that I'm probably not going to get hit any harder than that. So it was almost like build a little bit of confidence too that, whilst it was going to take me a little while till I could throw my weight around, at least I knew I could sort of cop it and get back up.
What's your thoughts on some of the coaches you've had during your career? Obviously, you arrived just after a coaching change. Stan Ells had been moved on. Tim Watson just took over. He was gone probably 18 months into your journey as a player. Malcolm Blight came and went within a season, and then obviously Grant Thomas and Ross Lyon during a very stable and ultimately fairly successful period for the Saints. So I guess, but you as a young player, impressions on Tim and then Malcolm, and then I guess how the club gradually grew under the next two coaches.
Yeah, I think lucky enough to play under a few coaches, and I think the thing is I probably feel like Grant and Ross probably had the most influence on my career, but definitely picked up different things. So Tim Watson, he taught me how to be a professional. He used to speak to me about, you're going to have a program, but if you're going to be successful in this game, you've got to go above and beyond it. So whether that's looking after your body midweek, you can't just do the program. So little things like that as a young player, certainly thank him for that. Blighty was such a lateral thinker. I'd obviously only my third year when we had him, but just had the utmost respect for what he'd done in the game. And some of his ideas on the game were just brilliant, very left field. I like playing under him. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. And then Grant came along, and I felt he really galvanised the club. brought us together. We had a bit of a blend of experience when traded and got guys like Geary and Hamill and some of these experienced guys, and obviously got some really good draft picks in his time. So yeah, and then had some relative success underground. I thought he was a great man manager, great coach. And then sort of on to Ross, who was probably early in his career, was probably more the other way, more of a tactical mastermind in terms of football, but over a year or two period, really built up that man management, and he was just a brilliant coach as well. So really lucky, to have some great coaches, even a little bit of time under Scott, and then I really, I only had a year under Richo, but I had a really good relationship with him.
And Malcolm Blight spoke a little bit this week about his experience with you. And obviously, as you mentioned, it was only a short one, but he mentioned that you were one of the few people to kind of go on Steam or give him a call. You were around the corner, I think he said, because his house was under siege the day that he was sacked or the day after. And you kind of spoke about what you took from him and his football brain and the way that he thought. But what was the reaction amongst the playing group? And why were you one of the only ones who went to see him? Was there other kind of negative thinking around the group at the time?
Well, it's hard to probably answer for other guys, but I just felt like he believed in me as a young player. Kenny Hinkley was his assistant coach with Peter Jonas, and I just thought they were a good group of guys. Now, whether Blighty was ready for what he was walking into at our club, he'd come away from successful stints at Geelong and Adelaide, and I think we're a long way off where those sides were. So I just felt a fair bit of empathy for how it all went down. Like he stood up in front of the group and, had pretty much just been sacked, wished us well in his career and walked out. And that was sort of it. And I just felt like I had to, just thank him for his time and for the belief that he showed in me.
Now, going back to GT again, he had the thought of having rotating captains might be good for the club in the future and bringing leaders through. And he chose yourself and Aaron Hamill to be co-captains at one point. And then on the back of that, you luckily were able to have the photo taken that everyone speaks about holding the cup. Have you smiled for a photo since, or?
I have smiled for every single photo since that moment. It was a funny one. I get asked about that a bit actually, and we did have the rotating policy, and talking to actually Nick Rewald about this the other night. But in that pre-season, we set out to win that comp, so that's pretty rare, like for a pre-season comp. But Tomo was like, "No, we're going to win this. We haven't got a winning culture in this football club at the moment, so we're going to win every game that we play." And we were lucky enough to do that. The 4 teams that we played, we actually played them in reverse order at the start of the season. Yeah. And so when we'd won the game, I think Tomo and I from memory, I reckon we hadn't had a beer that whole month because we're pretty keen on winning. I think Tomo could maybe sense a little bit of, a bit of a pressure release, and, could probably sense in the boys that were ready to cut loose a little bit. And just before we got up there, I think there's a bit of mucking around. He came over and said, "Look, I reckon we just need to keep a lid on this. We've got Geelong in 2 weeks. Let's not give them any ammo." We obviously had a good rivalry with Geelong back then. And as I said the other night, I think I'd probably just taken that way too literally. I couldn't crack it for half a smile. So I copped a bit of shit over that one.
So obviously the 2009 and 2010 teams so perilously close. It's the lasting memory, I think, for a lot of people. Obviously over that era might be the disappointment at the end, but it was such a wonderful journey. Could you sort of take us through, I guess, the key to how strong those sides were, and whether, as somebody who was so brave for the club during that period and so good for the club in those grand finals, what is your lasting memory of that period? Is it the camaraderie and the success, or does the mind occasionally go back to maybe those 10 or 15 minutes after the final sirens?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of both. The overriding sense is just how lucky, we were to play in just really, really good teams like that. And that's the thing that I've probably reflected on, is just how many good players I've played with as well. So 2009 was the most fun year I've ever had, bar the end of the season. But just, to win 19 games in a row, to play in a side that was just unconditional in the way we went about it, that sort of really sort of, probably tactically changed the game a little bit in terms of that forward press and manic pressure that, Hawthorn had sort of done the press, but we wanted to really get after him in that front half. It was just a lot of fun. We'd rock up to games and we knew that if we played anywhere near our best, we we're going to win. And that's it's pretty rare to have that at AFL level. So, just obviously the end was disappointing. The couple of games, I think we only lost, 3 games for that season, and one of them was on the last Saturday in September, which, still hurts, no doubt, because we would have loved nothing more than the St Kilda faithful to be able to celebrate our second premiership. But also as a player, you would have liked some of those, guys that sometimes didn't get the recognition that say myself or Nick or Dal or BJ got, guys like, Stephen Baker or Jason Blake, unfortunately Max didn't play in that game, but a guy like Max Hudson in his last year would have been unbelievable if he could have played in a premiership together. So, yeah, it was a little bit bittersweet. It was a great year. It just didn't finish the way we wanted it to.
The bond amongst you guys from that period is kind of folklore in St Kilda history. At the moment, you hear guys like Nick Rewalt, who's he's one of the harshest critics of footballers and especially teammates that we've seen at St Kilda ever, but talks about you in like godlike terms. And Stevie Baker out on Facebook this week talking about you as Superman and used to grab your jumper to try and grab a bit of your superhero powers, before games and at halftime, that sort of stuff. How do you feel about those guys talking about you in such glowing terms? I mean, how does that sit with you? 10 years later.
Oh, it doesn't sit all that comfortably with me. I really appreciate the words. But I never saw myself like that. I was just one of the guys who was just trying to, it's a bit cliche, but just play their role. I never saw myself as anyone, above anyone. Or I think the beauty of our group was that we're all very tight knit, and I think you have to trace that back to Tomo. Tomo was the one that, would always get us around to his place after games in pre-season. We're always doing stuff together. He was really big on, I don't know how many steaks that man cooked, but he would have us over all the time, and we just remained close. Even back then, we used to speak about taking less in our contracts, to try and keep everyone together, because we knew that if we could do that, we were a chance of having success. So I think it was built off that, and just the mutual respect, I guess, grows when you go through some of those good times and also some of those times are a little bit tougher as well.
I think GT was used to cooking about 30 steaks a feed in his family anyway, wasn't he? So,
exactly right.
Basically, a couple of things that held you back in your career. You had a couple of knee injuries that came up at 2006 first one, 2011 again against Tigers. How did you get through those times where you're going, okay, I know I'm going to be out for an extended period of time here? What was your mindset in those situations?
Yeah, it was tough. I think, they were definitely some of the tougher times. I think, I've always had pretty good support. Early in my career, that first knee, I actually went overseas with my brother for a couple of week period in the middle of my rehab there, which was great. Because when I left home, my brother was 11. So I think at the time he would have been about 21. So it was that was really good. And then I think for the second knee, I was just about to get married, so I had great support around me with my future wife there. And just you really rely on the support of your teammates, and you just throw yourself into your rehab as well. So sort of like anything, you just try and remain focused on those small goals, and then eventually be able to get back and get out there with the guys again.
Final one from me, and we certainly appreciate your time. Looking at your career as a whole, one thing that always comes up, we get polls in papers and internet and radio, and they say, who's your favourite opposition player if they don't barrack for the Saints? And you win nearly every one of those. You're obviously adored and admired by St Kilda supporters, but are you proud of that almost more than anything, that you've sort of crossed over as people who love the game, appreciate the way you played, and you've got that admiration from everybody in football, not just the supporters of your own club?
I guess there's something that maybe in the way that I played that they could either identify with or respected. I tend to think it's because there's maybe traits that I had that maybe every park footballer had. I wasn't quick. I never took a spec in my life. I probably couldn't kick over 45. Most times I kicked the footy. And then I try to, I guess, play in a hard but sort of fair manner. I probably maybe blurred the lines a few times. I still got suspended a few times, but people seem to forget about that. They still think I'm a good bloke. But, it's just one of those things that I guess you don't really have any control over it. But, I've always had pretty good support. And I guess, you're right. I guess upon reflection, pretty proud of that.
Lenny, I don't think there's been a more apt kind of semi-marketing campaign than your farewell tour and the I Love Lenny hashtag and the boys famously at the press conference wearing the t-shirts. You didn't look all that happy with it. What's the story around that?
I think in hindsight I probably should have waited to make the call, but there was a conversation. Obviously the club that year we were really struggling. I think we were bottom of the ladder. There was 7 or 8 rounds to go. I knew in my head early in the season that I wasn't going to play on, and sort of spoke to Richo, and I'm like, mate, I think I need to make this call. Just take a little bit of pressure off people asking me all the time, and just want to enjoy the last few weeks of my career. And he was all for it. Then the club sort of said, "Oh, look, what do you?" I said, "Look, if you can see, that we can market a little bit, or if the club can make a little bit of money in the last couple of weeks of the season, then go for it, sort of thing." So I didn't quite know what they had in store, and when they've all the boys walked out with the shirts on, I was taken a little bit back. I think to make matters worse, the boys knew how much I hated it, so they kept running with it.
Well, speak of.
Classic.
Had to do it.
Yeah, very good, very nice.
Now, as I guess a final, you mentioned that you couldn't kick it over 45 metres. I do remember one famous instance where we needed you to most, and you certainly did do that in the 2010 drawing grand final. But you were inducted into the Hall of Fame during the week, and it was a little bit different to normal. What normally happens, obviously, at those events is big crowds and family and friends and lots of people around in Crown Palladium. Obviously, it was a slightly different experience. Generally, the crowd would be asked to sort of stand up and give a toast and say cheers to those that have done it. So we thought we would honour you in that way as well ourselves on this particular night with a cheers to Lenny Hayes and your place in the Hall of Fame. Thank you very much for joining us. You were a superstar. You have been admired and loved by St Kilda supporters. Good luck with everything going forward, and well done on the due recognition for an outstanding career.
Thanks very much, guys. Pleasure.